everyone to Demonstrated Success. Let's see here, let me move this. Excuse my fumbling as this is our first time using Zoom, so we're going to work through this with you. But, oh, I can't change the slides, Anne, so that has to come from you.
The slide, oh, there we go, sorry.
I'm Elizabeth Dion. I'm the admin for Demonstrated Success, and I get to work with the wonderful Anne Mordecai.
I get to work with you. It's great.
Sure, we're very lucky. Thank you. I'm sure you've seen in action before here. She does a wonderful job. And we'll be able to answer any questions you might have during the presentation by you either typing it into chat or raising your hand and asking a question. And we always allow time at the end for question and answers as well.
Thanks. I'm going to stop sharing my video because I think it helps. It makes the screen bigger. And who wants to look at my face the whole time? So I'm going to stop my video.
And we did have one recommendation just to keep in mind as we do this, which is nice to mention. It's helpful, someone wrote, if you can mention when processes related to early elementary schools versus middle school students. So if there's anything you see that there to be a difference on, maybe to mention that.
Okay. It actually, most of what I'm doing is really related for everybody. I'm using a third grade example throughout, or fourth grade example, I guess, but it really can be used for any grade. And there's high school out there, and I think there were a few people signed up for from high school, and that will be a little bit different. In the chat, everybody, I hope, can see the little chat. I put a link to the documents that I'm going to use today. Like Beth said, this is the first time we've used Zoom webinar, so we've been using GoToWebinar, so we're just trying this out. So hopefully it will be the same, but I couldn't find a way to attach anything. So you have to go to the link if you want the stuff. I love this cartoon because you teach it, you think they learn it. I taught it, they must have learned it, but really that doesn't mean that they learned it. So we always have to talk about assessments and look at assessments, as much as we hate to do that. So I love this cartoon. I'm going to talk about why would you want to create your own assessment. And I assume if you're here, you have something in your head about why you want to. I'm going to try not to say also. The importance of knowing the standards, because that is important. That's like the main thing. The two main things, the importance of knowing the standards and how you're going to look at the results. And how you can find good questions. You don't have to write your own questions. You can, but there are so many questions out there on the internet that you really don't have to write them. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today is the standards and how to get to know them, how to apply them to finding questions, and then how to look at the results. Because creating the assessment, I could just say, okay, what's the standard? Go look it up. But that obviously isn't a good enough answer. I have a poll. I'm going to try and run it. I created this poll. I just want to see what happens. I have no idea how it works. Can you see that? Beth, can you see that? Actually, you're logged on differently.
Yes, I can see that. Sorry, I had me on mute. Yes. So if everyone can do that poll.
Yeah, if you can see it. So I can see people are looking now. They're answering.
Great.
Yeah. So then, I don't know, can you see the results showing up? I don't know. It says, just curious.
Yep, it is.
Yeah. Can people see the results too, or can somebody answer that in the chat? Or shall I read them?
No, they're saying no.
Okay, yeah, that didn't happen to go to the meeting. So just, it looks like we use STAR, NEWA, iReady, etc. And they don't give me the details that I need. There are quite a few others also. If you want to type in your others, that would be interesting. I'd love to hear what the other reason is that you're looking to create your own math assessments. You're just curious. I hate the ones that come with my math program, only about 7%. The ones I've been using don't seem aligned to the standards. That's interesting. And using STAR, iReady, and NEWA doesn't seem to give the detail. And I totally agree with that. And many others. So I'd love to hear some of those. Does anybody type?
I teach to the individual student.
Say that again?
A woman wrote, I teach to the individual student.
Okay, so you need specific for each student, okay.
And then someone else wrote, the math program is all advanced, not basic questions to see the foundations of the skills.
Okay. What
Bummer.
program is that, if you want to type, if you dare, if you want to say? Anyway, yeah.
Can you let us know, Danette, which program that is? And then another one, my own assessments and other content areas are better in that I can customize them for each student.
Mhm.
And then the person that said the math program is all advanced, not basic questions to see the foundations, uses Math in Focus.
Okay. Yeah, Math in Focus is different. Yep. Okay, thank you. I'm going to end the poll. I think I'm going to end the poll. There we go.
And then someone else wrote, Go Math assessments tend to be advanced, and the population I work with tends to be well below grade level. Oh, that's tricky, Rachel. And I really would like to pinpoint their conceptual understanding rather than procedural fluency. Use local assessments to adjust instruction.
Yep, those are good reasons. Yeah. I have found that most of the math programs, are geared to the math programs. So students may be able to solve some of the math program questions, but they can't necessarily solve standards that are really aligned to the standards. A lot of math programs are not aligned, so that even makes it harder. And Math in Focus is one that isn't really that aligned. In some cases, they're more advanced, and in some cases, they're less advanced. So we have people sent in a bunch of questions. So here are some of them. I'm just going to read through some of them and answer some of them, and then I'll answer some of them as we go through. What are some effective assessments used in both classroom and remote learning? I think any assessment that you create can be used in remote learning. You can set it up through Google Forms or if you have other software, but Google Forms works. The only thing you can't do is like the SAS assessments or fancier assessments. You can't click and drag, or I don't know how to make an assessment that you can click and drag, that kind of thing. But I think anyone can be used in both. Will there be conversions around DOK as well, or conversations? I think that's what you meant. I wasn't going to talk too much about depth of knowledge today. Mostly, I'm going to talk about standards and then where you find some questions to match. And the depth of knowledge will have to change. Some of the places that you can find questions will give you different depths of knowledge for the same question. So that's kind of handy. This is for all grade levels, really K through 8. High school, it's kind of the same, but it ends up being a little bit different for high school, especially if you're looking for lower level, then you have to know the lower level standards. But this is really geared for everybody. This was an interesting one. What if your district wants you to have fidelity with district math program? How can they both coexist without over-assessing? So I'm assuming you're meaning that your district is telling you that you have to give the unit assessments, end of module, that kind of thing, from your program, but there are other assessments you want to give. And that's a tough question. If they're insisting that you use the program's assessments, and then you want to add more, I think to make them coexist, you can write really short ones, or you could go through a process of trying to convince your district that they're not aligned, or convince them of the reasons that you want to use some other ones and take out the end of unit and put in your own end of unit. If you want, we can talk about that after. If you want to hang on or call, we can talk about that later. Whoops, I didn't mean to go back. I'm interested, this is in my way. I'm interested in local and task-based assessments for math. Local, and you can create your own. When I say local assessments, I mean creating your own, ones that you've created, and task-based assessments. And you can do those both for math, and we'll go through some of that. Do you use NCTM standards? The standards that I use are the New Hampshire College and Career Ready standards, which are actually the Common Core, exactly the Common Core, but they're called New Hampshire College and Career Ready. So the standards, worked with the NCTM when they were making them, but I don't follow the NCTM. New Hampshire, we follow the Common Core, we're supposed to. I'm interested in tools that I can use to get baseline data for progress monitoring, direct instruction, for IEP goals. So from this, you'll be able to, if your IEP goals are matching standards, which they may or may not be, but if they are, it's very easy to find questions that align at all different levels. So if you know, for instance, if your goal is that your students will solve all word problems, 10 word problems with addition and subtraction, you can make an addition and subtraction assessment to make sure they can do that, and then make a little bit harder word problem, 1 step maybe, then 2 step. It does depend on what your IEP goals. If they're not aligned, you're really gonna have to dig for your own. How do we align questions with the Common Core? That is what we're gonna talk about. What's the best way to conduct evaluations when students may still be at home? Should questions be multiple choice? I would say no, they should not be multiple choice. I hate multiple choice questions, but sometimes they make sense. For the students, and this goes to the next question too, how can we balance validity, reliability, rigor, and equity in our assessments for remote and blended learning this school year?
Excuse me, Anne?
Yes.
Could this be valid for high school as well? We have a high school teacher on, and we're usually doing more towards 8th grade. I wasn't sure.
We are going more to, my examples are going to be 3rd grade, but it's all about what are the standards, finding questions that are aligned, and how to look at the data. So this is that you can, if you're a high school teacher, this will be valid for you too.
Okay.
Or should be.
Thank you.
Okay. So these 2 questions, the end of the first one and all of the second one, are related to this particular year and how are we going to do it with distance learning. I think the biggest problem, the 2 biggest problems with assessing distance learning is how do we know if the parents are helping or not, and or if the kids are, sitting together doing it. We really won't know. And the other one is how to get them to take the test, so that you have to find some Google form or some other process to create these into an online assessment. And we are having a Google form webinar coming up. Maybe Beth, could you look that up? I can't remember the date.
Yes, I'll get back to you in a minute.
So we have that coming up this summer if you want to convert any of these assessments into Google Forms. Knowing if the parents are helping, to find out if 2 kids are sitting there and working together, I don't think there's any way we can know that unless they have the exact same answers. But to find out if the parents are helping, I thought about that. At first I thought, well, we could just say, parents, please don't help. And if your kid starts crying, tell them they don't have to finish the test, but let us know. Or we could say, please tell me how much you helped. So maybe that, we'd rather you didn't help, but if you do, please let us know how much. It still isn't going to be the same as if the students are taking the test in the classroom, but I'm not sure how else we can do it if we end up giving a lot of assessments at home.
We have not released the date yet for the Google.
Okay.
So I'd suggest you all come back looking at our data coaching on demonstrated success, the data coaching information. Likewise, it will also be emailed to you from our wonderful head of marketing, Paula. So demonstrated success will send out an email with all upcoming webinars when the dates are finalized for you. Thanks.
And at the end, I'm going to show you how to get to that website. Here we go. I'm going to start. So you all know the types of assessments for math. There's formative and summative. We've talked about those for years. Summatives you give at the end of teaching something and you just want to see how they did. Formatives you're giving so that you can see what they have learned and maybe change your instruction a little bit or set up intervention groups or small groups. But I kind of think no matter what, they're all formative. So even the SAS assessment that's given at the end of the year, or the SAT that's given actually next year at the beginning of the year, but usually at the end of the year, they are summative assessments, but you can get tons of information out of them. So in my head, every assessment is a formative assessment. You should take all you can out of it. And maybe for if you're giving an end of year assessment, which is really a summative assessment for the student, and that information hopefully goes on to the next year's teacher, and you can't do anything with that student anymore because she or he is not your student. But you can look at the results and go, oh, all my kids got this wrong. I must have to change something I'm doing in order to change what the outcome of that. If they all let's say they all got the same wrong answer, and that does happen, especially if it's multiple choice, there's something that you said the day you were teaching that, or the days you were teaching that, that confused them. So you can go back and look at it that way. So they're always formative. So but otherwise, the different kinds of assessments are, there's units, end of years, you can buy them. They get basic skills, deeper thinking. There are state, which are like the SAS and, like the SAS right now. National, or like NEWA, I guess the SAT is kind of a national assessment. STAR, anything that's nationally normed is a national assessment. Local assessments are the ones you make. Assessments can be short or long. Just the facts, you can do just word problems. I mean, they're all different types of math assessments. And when do we give these assessments? All over the place, beginning of the year, end of year, trimester, midterm, before you start a topic, after you start a topic, when you're done, when you're told to, in some cases, just a million different reasons and times when you give assessments. I feel like I'm talking really fast, so I'm going to try and slow down a little. Do you have a question? Yeah.
If all students get the same question wrong, you could also look at the assessment item. Is it a problem with the question? Oh, sorry.
Absolutely. That's true. That's very true. And if you look at it and go, oh, that's just a weirdly written question, then that's true. I forgot that part. So what is the assessment for? There should always be a reason that you're giving an assessment. It can be the end of the year for whatever reason. You want to align things to the report card, find out how students are doing so you can create the report card. You can learn what students learned. You can learn what you may need to change, what questions you may need to just cross off, etc. So there has to be a reason. Sometimes, if you're giving the STAR assessment and you don't know why, but they're telling you have to, it could just be because the school board is saying you have to. And if that's the reason, that's the reason. If it's not doing teachers or students any good, then you can try and work with the school board to change that. But if the reason is the school board, then that's the reason. There always should be a reason. Why create your own? And there are a lot of reasons, again, and if you can think of others, please type them in. You can, one of the things is you want to align it with what you're teaching. So that's one of the downfalls of the national assessments and the state assessments, is that it doesn't align with the timing of your teaching. So you just taught fractions, something about fractions, and you want to test something about fractions, but your test, that the STAR is testing everything. And then you don't really get the detail from it. So that you want something that really aligns with what you're teaching. You want to determine needs for intervention or small groups. You want to assess what you want to assess. Like sometimes your end of unit might be full of word problems and you just want to know if they can multiply. Sometimes using the program is not assessing the Common Core, it's just assessing if the students learned what was taught in the program. You can use the SAS and the benchmarks and the interims, which I would absolutely say you should do. But there are times, again, where those questions are so in depth that you don't know if the kids can even add. So those, even though I love those assessments, and in many cases I would say don't write your own, use them. But if you need to get some more detail or more, more concrete in what they're knowing, you might not want to use those at the time. And again, the national assessments don't necessarily align with what you're teaching. So to start, when you're going to create an assessment, you really need to think about, and you have it in your head, you know what you want to test, but apply it to the standards. What are the standards that you want to cover? And if it isn't based on the standards, if you can't come up with the standards that you want to cover, you really should think about what it is that you're doing and why. If in 4th grade you're assessing addition facts, you want to create an addition fact assessment. That's not a 4th grade standard, or even 8th grade, but you really may want to assess that. So maybe in that case, you don't need to know the standards, but in general, you should be assessing your standards at your grade level or the standards at a lower or higher grade level, but you should know what the standards are. And do all the standards have equal weight? And they don't. And I'm going to show you a document at the end that will tell you where the emphasis should be. And I don't know how many people know that already, that there are some emphasis documents that show you which standards have more weight than others. So if you're if you're spending the time to assess students on some of the standards, do you have time to spend on assessing the ones that are really just additional standards? You should look at it, think about that. You want to know about how many questions. Is this going to be 100 questions or 3 questions? What are you going to do with the results, and who's going to use them? How are they going to use them? And probably when, but if you're not going to do anything with the results, then I wouldn't even bother giving the test, which in some cases doesn't work. Like if your school board tells you have to give NEWA, but you don't look at the results, your school board's telling you have to, so that's okay. But otherwise, somebody should be looking at the results from this assessment. You want to know when it will be administered and by whom. How will the information be communicated? Do you have to tell anybody the results? The students, another teacher, the parents? And who's on the team? So those are the basic things you really should think about before you start creating the tests. And I have a document that you can follow, and it's on the link that's in the chat. If you want to get to it, you can get to it after, but you can look at it now if you want. It's got a few questions. Who's on the team? So it's either 4th grade or 4th grade in special ed or whatever, just me. I think creating a just me assessment isn't the best. It's fine, but really you want to see as a group how you're doing. If you're an algebra teacher, how are all the students who are taking algebra doing? And if there's more than just you teaching algebra, you should probably involve the other teachers. For 4th grade, all 4th grade teachers should be involved. All 8th grade math teachers should be involved. So that would be the team. What's the purpose and the name of the assessment? What standards are going to be covered? How many questions? How will the results be used? How will they be collected? And I'm going to go over each one of these individually. When will the assessment be administered? How will the information be communicated? Who's on the review team of the data? Any specifics, and you want to make an answer key probably, and any notes and questions. So let's look at these first. This is from the first page. The top said who's the team, but what's the purpose of the assessment and the name? You want to just give it a name. What standards will be covered? And the SAS points and the CC emphasis I'll talk about later, but right now it's just talks about which standards are more important, and I'll show you that at the end. How many questions? How will the results be used, and how will the results be collected? Somebody actually has to do something with the results, not just, you don't want to just look at the score at the top of the page and say, oh, Susie got an 80, Billy got a 70, Sarah got a 20, I'm going to put her in that pile. You want to look at each question and see how they did. That's the power of the local assessment that you create yourself, is you can look at every single detail, every single item, and see what happened. So the purpose and the name, I'm going to give you an example. The purpose is the beginning of the year. Can my students solve word problems? Especially at the beginning of this year, a lot of thought has to go into, and I know a lot of schools are talking about it. How are you going to assess your students this year? What are you going to assess them with, and what are the questions you want to cover, or what are the standards you want to cover? How are you going to determine, if you're a 4th grade teacher, how much of the 3rd grade my students learned? And you could ask the 3rd grade teachers what they taught, but you don't know what the students learned or what they lost since March. So this whole question of creating an assessment at the beginning of this year is a little more important. So in this case, my example for this time is going to be, I want to create an assessment for the beginning of the year just to see if my students can solve any word problems. The name is the beginning of the year solving word problems. Aren't I creative? Okay, so what standards will be covered? I'm going to actually come back to this because this is such a key point, and it takes a little while to figure out how you're going to do that. Ballpark, how many questions? I say 4 to 6. Doesn't really matter what you say there, whatever you think. How will the results be used? By whom and when? The results will be used for intervention grouping by the whole 4th grade team, and for interventions starting in October. So I'm quite specific. I really want to, what am I going to do with these results? I mean, if I'm just going to give an assessment and I don't have time to look at the results or do anything, it's not really worth giving the assessment. Sorry. How will the results be collected? By when and by whom? So this is a question of how are you going to put all of the questions and results or the answers really into a spreadsheet is what I am suggesting. You really want to look at each question individually, how all students did. If you want to look at individual questions on how each student did, this also in a spreadsheet will help you do that. So teachers will enter the results into a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet, Sarah, whoever Sarah is going to create the spreadsheet, and Sarah will format the results by the 17th. So teachers enter their data by the 15th, students, or Sarah will format it, the report, by the 17th. So you have to give the assessment before that, before the 15th. So all this is filled in. Now, God, sorry. I've got this form filled in, the first page of the form. And that really is enough to get started. So I'm going to get started. I want to see if my student can solve word problems at the beginning of 4th grade, because every year I know kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, they do work on word problems, but I don't know how far they got, if the students retained anything. I have no idea, so I want to find out. And when you're doing word problems, it helps you find out if they can solve word problems, but it also helps you find out if they can do addition and whatever kind of computation is happening in the word problem. If your word problem, well, I'll talk about that in a minute. So what kind of word problems? I mean, I could make word problems just addition, you know, Sarah saw 7 shells, Sally saw 4 shells. How many did they see altogether? An addition and subtraction type word problem. Or do I want multiplication and division in there? Because I know 3rd graders have multiplication and division. Do I want to put fractions in? 1 steps, 2 steps? I have no idea. What are they supposed to know by 3rd grade? If you're a 4th grade teacher, you may not know what they're supposed to know by 3rd grade. So what you have to do is look at the standards. I put a standards document out there that's got K through 12. It's out on that link. The beginning of the 4th grade, the 2nd page of 4th grade looks like this. Because I'm a 4th grade teacher, I have the 4th grade standards. But I don't want to test them on 4th grade standards because we haven't even started 4th grade yet. I want to test them on 3rd grade standards. So I want to go back to the 3rd grade standards. And here's a page from the 3rd grade standards. I don't want to read every single one of them because I know there are too many. I just want to find standards that relate to word problems. To do that, if you have a Mac, it's Command F. If you have a PC, I think it's Control F. If you do that, if you hit Command F or Control F, a little window will open for finding something, and you type in whatever you want to find. And in this case, I want to find word. So I'm going to word as in word problem. So I type it in, and it comes to the first instance of word. So here's the standard. Use multiplication and division within 100. I'm just going to scan them first. Use multiplication and division with 100 to solve word problems, blah, 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 blah. Okay, where's the next one? Solve 2-step word problems using the 4 operations. Okay, blah, 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 blah. Tell and write time. Solve word problems involving addition and subtraction of time intervals. Okay, that's time word problems. And here's the last one down on the bottom. Measurement of liquids and masses. So 1-step word problems with that. Yikes. More? No, there are no more. So there were 4 standards related to word problems. And I know this is about assessments. And you're going, why is she talking about the standards? But in order to create an aligned assessment, you have to know what the standard is that you're aligning to. So in 3rd grade, there are 4 standards that refer to word problems. There's one in operations and algebraic thinking, or there are 2 actually. There's a multiplication and division within 100, and there's 2 steps involving the 4 operations. Measurement and data, there are also 2. There's one related to telling time, and there's one related to masses or volumes. And that's just general. So let's see. Do I want to assess them all? That seems like way too much. Well, how about I just do the operations and algebraic thinking? Actually, how about I just do the 2 steps for operations, which would, I could also do 1 steps and 2 steps, just a small chunk. I could make an assessment that tested all those, but it would be there would be too many. So I'm just going to start with 1 and 2 step word problems that involve the 4 operations. Now I want to go back and look at that standard again. And there it is, solve 2-step word problems. I'm going to click on and bring it up in more detail. Here it is. So I want to solve 2-step word problems using the 4 operations. I know what that means. I can just write those. But when you look further, in 3rd grade, you have to represent these problems using equations with a letter standing for the unknown quantity. Now, this is something that 3rd grade teachers don't even know they're supposed to do sometimes. And even in 2nd grade, and I can't remember first, but in 2nd grade, they're supposed to start using a variable or some kind of something. It doesn't have to be a letter. It could be a box or an apple or a heart or something, but they have to use a symbol to stand for the unknown quality. And assess the reasonableness of your answer using mental computation and estimation strategies, including rounding. And there's a little 3 there, so I wanted to bring up the little footnote. This standard is limited to problems posed with whole numbers, having whole number answers. Okay, that's good. So no fractions, no remainders. Students should know how to perform operations in the conventional order when there are no parentheses. Okay, order of operations. So they have to do order of operations, but okay, so good to know. Let's see, I am going to focus, even this is a lot, and assessing the reasonableness of answers using mental computation. I do not know if I have not figured out a way to assess mental computation. I don't know if someone's doing something mentally. I can assess if a student can quickly do their facts, and I can assume from that they're doing it mentally and not using their fingers if they do it really quickly. But I don't know how to assess mental computation. So, but I could assess rounding, and I can assess all the other parts. So this is 2 steps. So I've dug into this standard. Now I know what kind of word problems I'm going to use. 2 steps, 4 operations, variable, assessing the reasonableness, using rounding. I probably won't do assessing the reasonableness. Like, yikes, an order of operation, all of that. I'm gonna pull my hair out. That's too many things. I can't assess all that. You can, but I don't want to assess all that. So, okay, let's Google it. Don't panic. You don't have to write these things. You can just Google it. And when you Google it, all you do is type in questions for whatever the standard was. I'm going to go back a minute. I'm going to go back one more. So this is operations and algebraic thinking. And I think everybody knows that those are OAs. If you're in high school, it's, F is for functions. There are a few different algebra notations for the algebra standards, but you've got a grade level, and it's high school and not a grade level for high school. You might have 8 EE. So you have to know what your standards are. If you don't know that part, write to me. And if a lot of people don't know that, we can do a webinar. If just a few people don't, I can just meet with you online. But this particular standard is 3 for 3rd grade, operations and algebraic thinking, and it's number 8. So now I will go forward. So I want to look up 3, operations and algebraic thinking, number 8. So I just type in questions for that standard. And when I hit enter, I get something like this. And let me see if I can make it a little bigger. There we go. So I've got a lot of options. Like here, pages worth of options, and then look at, 10 more pages there, probably more. But the ones I'm interested in usually come up at the beginning. Here's Howard County. Sometimes I get ads first, so I can skip the ads. But this one says HCPSS. That's Howard County something school system. They actually have some great ones. Then there's Engage New York, which also has some great ones. Teachers Pay Teacher does have some great ones, but you never know. So I would be careful with those. Super Teacher, Core Standards I just happen to know that Core Standards doesn't give you questions. They just tell you about the standard. Khan Academy is a good one. And I'm gonna go there for a minute. So Khan Academy, when I'm looking for standards or questions, I definitely go to Khan Academy. If I had, since I typed in OA, it's gonna give me all the OAs. So here's 3OA1. I'm gonna scroll down, 3OA5, 3OA6, 3OA7, 308. Okay, so this is my solve two-step word problems. Let's look at this one, two-step word problems. If I click here, I'm going to get some examples of questions. If I like them, I don't know if you can read that, I'm going to make it bigger. If I like them, I can use them. You can cut and paste. I had a jar of jelly beans that weighed 56 ounces. So there's some of the, it's using some of the volume, or using the measurement and data standard, but it still counts. 56 ounces. I added 6 more ounces of jelly beans, then divided the jelly beans evenly into bags that weighed 8 ounces. So this is a two-step problem. They have to add and then divide. It's got it's got 2 of the 4 operations. It's a word problem. It's good. Copy it, use it if you want to. And you can put in the answer and move on. And you can get a lot of good questions. Some you'll like, some you won't, but you can cut and paste this or just copy the word for word. So that's one way to get some questions to put into your assessment. I'm gonna go back to I'm gonna have to Google questions for 308. Let's see what else we get. So here's the Khan Academy. I'm gonna show you Howard County. They have some good, yeah.
Someone wrote that Howard County in Maryland is a top system. And then someone also wrote Achieve the Core and Illustrative Mathematics.
All of them, yep.
Great questions and tasks aligned. And someone else mentioned that they also use that. And then another comment is if your district is connected with OGAP, they have amazing item banks that include very specific questions to figure out what kids know and are able to do.
Those are all really, really good suggestions. So Howard County, Achieve the Core, Illustrative Math, and OGAP, right?
Yes. Great.
All fantastic places. And they actually get better and better as time goes on. Engage New York is great too, but it's hard to find the questions, harder to find the questions. So here's the Howard County, and I love Howard County. If I go into this, it gives me all these different options. So here's the standard, here's some learning targets, here's about the math. And actually this whole thing is this spreadsheet alone is very interesting, or this chart there. But if I want to go to preferred resources, here are a whole bunch of problems. Solve two-step problems with all 4 operations. Add addition and subtraction word problems. 1-step word problems with any operation. 2-step word problems. So I'm just going to click on this. So here's a 2-step word problem with addition and subtraction. I need to make a copy of it. And it's waiting. And there it is. They've just recently put these in. The person who was looking for tasks at all levels, this is a great place. It starts with, Rita found 9 eggs. Andre found 23 more than Rita. They decided to put their eggs together. How many eggs were in the basket? Work with a partner. Rita found 9. Now they're going to get a little more in depth and a little more in depth. So these are great. And they're set up as PowerPoints. So you can either just cut and paste and put them on an assessment, or you can have kids work together through them. So the project-based, the person who asked about performance tasks or project-based, not really project, but performance tasks, Howard County is a great place. Let's see if I can get back to that out of Howard County. So you can find tons of examples in there. Just cut and paste, don't write your own. Really, truly, don't write your own. Achieve the Core. I'm gonna go to Achieve the Core and get one of them. Achieve the Core, here it is. 2-step problems using the 4 operations. This is it, Achieve the Core. And let's say I want to download one. Here's some problems over here. I'm going to download one in Word because then I can really just cut out the questions. Open it. It starts with an explanation of the standard. It gives you some ideas about it and some hints for teaching and some language, some vocabulary. And then it comes to the questions. So there were 56 birdhouses at school today. 4 classes made more birdhouses. Each class made 8 of them. How many are there now? Which is great. Instead of how many are there altogether, it leads people away from using those keywords, because keywords doesn't work. You can't, if you teach students to solve problems with keywords, I could give you a million problems that doesn't work. So that's a dangerous way to teach math, to teach solving word problems. And again, if you want to talk about that after, stay on, or we can talk about it offline, or I can call, or whatever you would like. But so here are some word problems. It's a couple steps. The numbers are simple. They're all going to come out to whole numbers. I like that one. You can go through this and say, oh, I like that one. I don't like this one. You can add things to it. You could take out this question and add one from Khan Academy. But for this case, I'm just going to use these. I'm going to use the first 5 because I like them. But I want the kids to show their work because I want to be able to see where they get stuck. And I want them to write an equation because that's part of it. So I'm going to say, show your work, write an equation with a letter for the unknown. So I can add anything I want. And for this, I'm just going to add this to every single question like that. And I have an assessment. I'm just going to take 5 of them. Whoops, I messed up the format a little bit. So I add that. I'm going to keep these 5 questions. I'm going to get rid of the rest. Just delete all the rest. And it's even got all the answers, ideas on how to, some rubrics if it needs it. This is just how they might solve it. So these are great ones, and this was Achieve the Core Remember. So this is the test I'm going to use. I've just created an assessment that really does align with part of that standard. It doesn't have these don't have rounding. So I might want to add one with rounding. They didn't have equations, so I added that. There's no rounding. So I may have to add that, or I'll just skip it for now and just give straight word problems. So there's the assessment. I want to go back to my PowerPoint if I can figure out how. Okay, PowerPoint. So that's how you search for questions. That's the whole thing. If you know the standard, search for questions and search for ones that match and use those places. Use Khan Academy, OGAT, Achieve the Core, Howard County. Gage New York is good. They're just harder to find. And, stay away from Teachers Pay Teachers because you don't really know, unless you can look at it and say, oh, that's a great one. It absolutely matches the standard. If it does, great. If it doesn't, then move on. So here's my assessment. And I added show your work, write an equation, show your work, write an equation. So it's the exact, I just took them word for word. If you want to change, you could change birdhouses to, I don't know, something else. I can't think of anything. Mrs. the name of a teacher, you could change any of it. You've got the test, you give the test to the students. Then you have to do something with the data. And so like I said at the beginning, the 2 important pieces are what's the standard and how are you going to look at the data? What are you going to do with the data? So in this case, I made a spreadsheet, and I'm hoping in every school, in each grade, there's at least one person who can do the spreadsheet. And if there isn't, and it's something that you're interested in, again, let me know, and I can work with you on that. It's a really great skill, and for looking at data, it's really useful. So look at this. This is, here are my students. Here's question 1, question 2, question 3. And the first question was about birdhouses. So I just put question 1, 56 birdhouses. Question 2, Mr. Dent, just so I remember what the questions are and I can align them when I'm looking at the results. I'm sure which question I'm looking at. And I broke it into showing your work. Did the students show work? Is there an equation with a variable? And is the answer correct? With your team, you have to decide whether showing your work is they showed something and they get a point. They showed, they didn't show anything, they get no points. Do they have to show something that makes sense? Do they, that you have with your team, you have to decide how you're going to correct that. Same with an equation. If they show an equation with a variable, but it doesn't make sense, do they get a point for it? If they show an equation without a variable, do they get a point for it? You have to decide how you're going to put the points on this. In the end, you're going to give Susan, she's going to get, 7% or 73% or 90% based on how many questions there are. And that isn't, the number of questions they get right or wrong, the percentage that they get right or wrong, isn't really what's the main thing to look at when we're done. So I'll show you what you want to, so giving these 2 points and 1 point and 3 points, weighting them, isn't that important for this purpose. So here's the spreadsheet. This time I decided, it's the same spreadsheet, I just color coded. So show your work is all green. Equations with variables is blue. Answers are pink for every single question. Now I put the data in. So Susan showed her work on the first question. She didn't put the variable in correctly. She got the right answer. So only ones and zeros on this one. I just put that in for every single student, how they answered each one, ones and zeros all the way through. The next step is to give every student a score, just so I can rank them. Like the student, this person, Art, who got 93%, they probably don't need any intervention. These students down here do. And you have to decide where, 67, that's not that great, but you can work on where they are. So just based on this, you could put them into intervention groups. You can definitely work with them individually based on this. But one more step is to sort them by the number of points correct on each question. So right now, this is question 1, show your work. Question 1, equation. Question 1, answer, etc. But now I'm going to sort it. So it's in the order of this question, most students got correct, to this one, most students were incorrect. So 18 students got this correct, and only, I can't see the whole way over, 6 got this correct. And if you look at it, since I color coded it, the green, most of them showed work. In the middle, it's kind of in the middle for equations, and very few of them got the right answer. That's at the low end. The right answer is at the low end. So overall, for the whole class, that's what I need to work on. Generally, this would actually come out that the equation was at the low end. But my students on this particular assessment overall struggled with getting the correct answer. So I need to work on that with them. But you can then look at these students who struggled the most. So how you put your data together and looking at your data is important. And here's another example. If I'm looking at this, whoops, I'm gonna go back. I could see which question gave them the most trouble too. So I would go back and look at the questions and say, oh, they couldn't do this one. Oh, it was the multiplication question, and I better work on that. But this is something that happened when I was doing this once before. So here's the students, they all the same name. Here's how they scored. The answers are in here, the correct answers. These were multiple choice. Some were worth some points. And across the top, I have the questions in order from the students who got the most right to the one that most students got wrong. And I have the whole question written up there. So we got this data and everybody said, okay, all right. This was right when we started looking at data. And the teachers wanted to look at, okay, what do we need to reteach? But I forced them to look at what they did well first. It's okay. 100% of the students could multiply 2-digit number by 2-digit number. Yay, we taught that well. We knew we could do that, yay. Then they went to the next one. They could compare 2 fractions. Only 75%, but that's not bad. Better than I thought. Good, we taught that well. And they could divide within 100. Great, that's great. I knew all that. We've seen them do it. So now I'm gonna go over to the low end. Only 44% could multiply a 2-digit number by a 2-digit number. Wait a minute, that's exactly the same. That's the same skill. 25% could compare 2 fractions, and 13 could divide within 100. It was the same stuff on the high end and the low end. And if I had just looked at this, I would have said, oh, wait, I've seen them multiply 2-digit number by 2-digit number. It doesn't work. I know they can do it. Oh, they're just messed up. But what happened was they all said, oh, this is stupid, what a waste of time. I mean, this was way at the beginning of looking at data. But what we ended up doing was we took the test and we cut it up. So each question was on its own piece of paper, and we laid it on the floor in this order from the highest to the lowest. And we looked at it, and we looked at it, and we looked at it. And we said, what, first we said, well, these must be harder. These must all be, we knew they were all word problems, but these must be harder ones. These must be easier ones, the other way around, actually. We came up with all these reasons. And finally, we saw that these high ones had pictures with them. These low ones did not have pictures. So instead of teaching our children to multiply again, which we knew they could do, or compare fractions, which we knew they could do, or divide, which we could see that they could do, what we had to do was teach our students to draw pictures when they were solving word problems. So really digging into the data does make a difference and does inform your instruction. This is the most profound, well, there are a couple others actually, but this was pretty profound what we noticed. And it made a huge difference when we stopped and started teaching how to draw pictures and enforce drawing pictures with their word problems. It made a big difference.
And we have,
yes.
This would be a great potential webinar. Other people can chime in if they'd be interested in this. Asking if we would do a webinar. Do we have any? We don't currently have any planned yet, but do you have any webinars that teach you how to use Excel for recording data?
We have thought about that a lot. You should write that down, because we should do that. Yes, we will do that.
And then nobody else had answered. Another woman asked, based on all the things that we mentioned, OGAP, Achieve the Core, Illustrative Mathematics, Howard Co. Someone asked if they were free to use.
Yes, they're all free.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Do you consider creating bar diagrams as drawing pictures?
Absolutely. I love bar diagrams, actually. Okay. And I still am amazed that if I have a word problem with 2 kittens and four kittens, and a second grader can convert that in their head to a bar diagram, it still amazes me, because I think of them as so concrete, as the students as so concrete, but second graders are able to use bar diagrams. So I love them. And that's another thing. If people want some training for bar diagrams, type in yes, no, whatever in there, and then we can decide if we should have one of those. So using bar diagrams to solve problems. That would be a great one. But yes, we will have Excel. We've talked about that before. So at this point, we're almost at the end, and we have filled out this, what was the name? I think I showed you all that. The most important, again, what's the standard and how are you going to look at the results? You have to think about those 2 things. This is the end. This is the second page of the document. When will it be administered? That's, and by whom? All 4th grade teachers. How will the information be communicated? Sometimes it needs to be, sometimes it doesn't. Who's on the review of the data team? Any specifics? Do you have the answer key and notes? And remember that Howard County has great examples of performance tests and questions, and they have the answer key, which is great. This is what I talked about earlier. One of the documents I gave you, I think, is called Emphasis K through 8. And I'm sorry, high school, there isn't one for high school, but this is how the emphasis is shown for 3rd grade and 4th grade and 5th grade. K through 1 is a little bit different, but you'll be able to follow it the same. So here is OA3A, which is the heading of the standard. So it's actually called the cluster. And there are 3 or 4 standards under here. 3 or 4 standards under here. If you have your standards document that I put in the link and this document together, that you'll be able to see it. So this cluster of standards on a document that was put out by Achieve the Core, which is what we were using mostly, these are all major standards. Everything under operations and algebraic thinking for 3rd grade is major. Numbers of base 10 for 3rd grade is additional. Major, major, supporting, major, supporting. But on the SAS test, it's a little bit different. And I still am trying to find out why and if they're going to change that. On the SAS test, this cluster is worth 4 to 6 points. This is worth 2 to 3 points, 1 to 3 points, 7 to 10. So if it's worth 7 to 10 points, according to the SAS assessment, it is the most important for third grade, because the more you get that correct, the more points you're going to get on the test. This would be the least important. So when you're going to focus your time on the majors. I didn't go over this a lot in detail just because it takes some time. But if you look at it and it doesn't make sense, again, call me. I keep saying call me, write to me. I will respond. I really will. So don't be shy. Just call or write. If this doesn't make sense, let me know. It takes a few minutes to get through it, but if you have your standards document with you next to this, you'll be able to see how it lines up. I have a document that has some of the, it's on that site that has some of the places you can look. I don't have OGAP on there because that was newer than this document, but these are great places. And just to wrap up, what is the assessment for? Why are you creating it? What are the standards? About how many questions? Do they all have equal weight? And you can use that emphasis document. And how will the results be used? That's it. Before I go over that, that is really it. I just want to know, before I go on to just sort of really wrapping up, do you have any more, are there any more questions?
A nice woman wrote, teach kids to draw pictures. Can you elaborate, please?
Oh, yes, I can do that. Let's say it says, my problem is I have 5 ducks and 3, this is a pretty simple question, 3 swam away, or I had 3 pizzas and somebody ate a third of each pizza. Draw a picture of 3 pizzas with a third missing, and then work on the problem from there. So you can do, or draw a bar diagram. That's hard to say. Draw a bar diagram. Any kind of picture that you can do. And if I said that too quickly, you can hang on and ask me later, or call more.
No, but just so everyone hears, again, that at the end of this webinar, you will get an email tomorrow, and the presentation will be in the email, the link to our YouTube channel, so you can watch this webinar again, or any of the webinars we've done on the YouTube channel as well. Oh, and someone's asking, can we a copy of the standards document, please? Do we have that, Anne?
It should be in the link.
Okay.
If it isn't, I'll make sure I put it there.
That's super.
Okay. And I just want everyone to know that these are some webinars we have coming up this summer, and maybe we'll put in an Excel one in there, or a couple Excels actually. And every other week, or Thursday and every other Thursday, we are having meetings with schools from around the state just talking about school reopening. So if you want to join in on that, you can go to Demonstrated Success. You can actually type in this whole thing, public VTNH, and this will actually, has that changed, Beth? That may have changed.
Has it, can you say it again?
It says public VTNH. I think it's changed, but if it hasn't, you can just click on, if you go to Demonstrate Success, you can follow the links to get to the list of webinars, and you will be mailed anything that's coming up.
Yep. So all of you that have been in it today, someone did ask and I responded, but in case you missed it, if you're here today, we will send you an email with upcoming webinars as well. And as they change, you'll be notified of those changes. But you can also always find them on our website. If you go to demonstratedsuccess.com, over on the right, you'll see workshops and webinars. If you go into data coaching and assessments, they will be there. There's also some listed under virtual teaching in New Hampshire, but this one is listed under data coaching and assessments. And it's definitely great to look there.